You are listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
We have our first guest today, and I want to welcome him back to the Final Say radio program. I'm always happy to have Nick Laurie, from the Heritage Foundation, by the way, on the program. Nick, we appreciate you joining us today, and I'm sure that you have a lot of very thoughtful and insightful information on this climate report from the White House. And to be honest with you, I've looked through it, but I certainly don't want to read every word in it because it's one of those things that drives me nuts every time they put out one of these types of reports. So we certainly have to rely on the experts such as yourself. So welcome back.
So thank you for having me.
So the bottom line is, I suppose the Earth is falling off its axis, and if we don't drastically make these changes and succumb to what they want us to do, that we're all going to pay a heavy price. And I'm guessing that's what the report basically says. But what would we say after reading it?
Yeah, that's what it says, but a lot of the claims are just simply wrong and misleading. In fact, some of the things it leaves out is that there's no significant trends for things like tornadoes and floods and droughts, yet it makes the case that we're headed for these extreme weather events. So the problem at large with the report is that the projections and the statements that they're making they're just not borne out in the data. So that's the biggest problem, is that it's using a lot of scare tactics and fear mongering to create this notion that we're headed towards catastrophic climate change, when yes, the climate's changing, yes, the Earth has been warming, and yes, man has something to do with it, but the reality is the intensity and the frequency with which the climate is changing is not as catastrophic as this report warns.
Well, here's a question I would have, because a lot of literature and books that I've read over the years have clearly demonstrated that we've had cooling and warming periods for not just hundreds, but thousands and tens of thousands and millions of years. And in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that man is living on Earth for that long a period, and that there have been other factors which are more naturally occurring, if you will, than man-made. And so I question, two things I question here. One, how much are we actually contributing to this issue? And two, if the United States were to completely, transform the way we do everything, how would it really change anything outside of completely destroying our economy, when I seriously doubt, after China and India and other big nations with huge populations witnessing the economic destruction in the United States, that they would do the same thing?
Exactly, and that's the biggest point here. And you're right. The report, for instance, mentions that precipitation patterns are changing, but they've never been constant. So there's a lot of things in the climate that haven't been constant, and sea level is rising, but it's done that since the end of the last ice age. So you're exactly right, and I think we should have an open and honest debate about how much man is contributing to climate change, and that's where the models don't have a good sense of really how much a doubling of CO2, how much warming that will actually amount to. So the fact that the models can't really project what that will do to the climate is problematic. But I think what you said towards the latter end of that sentence is exactly right, that all of this, these greenhouse gas regulations, this attempting to re-engineer our energy economy to switch away from conventional fuels towards carbon-free ones, all of that's going to do is drive up energy costs, squeeze production and consumption, reduce income, and destroy jobs. And even if we were to stop all of our CO2 emissions today, you're only talking about reducing global temperatures by a few tenths of a degree Celsius by the year 2100, because places like China and India aren't going to stop emitting CO2, and they shouldn't either. These are developing countries, and they have more pressing environmental problems to deal with, like gaining access to clean drinking water and clean breathable air, and CO2 has nothing to do with that.
Yeah, excellent point. Yeah, when I look at it, even when you evaluate alternative energy sources, whether it be solar or wind, all of the components, whether it be the solar panels themselves or these huge things that, spin around and supposedly capture wind energy and whatnot, I don't see how they make any of the components or install these massive, wind farms or solar farms, if you will, without using other types of resources that add to the problem in the first place.
Yeah, you're right.
If I could just add, then when you look at the cars, all the electric cars with their batteries and all the other components, what happens to all this stuff during the manufacturing process, and what happens when its useful life is over?
Yeah, and if you look at the carbon footprint and just the footprint in general of some of these things, with all the mining activities of the rare earth minerals and using backup power when some of these intermittent sources of energy can't provide energy and they need backup natural gas plants, you are talking about not that much of a difference. And sub studies have actually shown that wind turbines are actually more greenhouse gas intense, than conventional sources of energy, and that's not a reason not to build them, but it is a reason not to subsidize them or regulate other sources of energy out of existence, for this notion that it's somehow going to save the climate.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, if we were to look at the White House's report now, what are their next steps? Are we to see more, unusual use of agencies to go after businesses and force states and big corporations to make these changes that they want done, or is this just rhetoric?
No, the problem is, despite Congress rejecting, these big cap and trade proposals, the Environmental Protection Agency is moving forward with greenhouse gas regulations. They're finalizing regulations that would effectively prohibit the construction of new coal-fired power plants. In the beginning of June, they're going to come out with regulations for existing power plants that's going to prematurely shut the ones we have offline faster than they otherwise would, not to mention a bunch of different executive orders, geared towards, energy efficiency regulations. So they're going at this any way they can to bypass Congress and get the outcome that they want.
Yeah, and that's so I guess it's a trend. We've seen kind of the war on the coal industry. The 3 or 4 major states that rely on that industry are being hurt significantly, with hundreds of thousands of jobs being lost and communities probably just going bankrupt. I don't know what these communities are going to do to help themselves. And then you see, like the holdup of things like the Keystone pipeline crossing over into Canada, and just other types of things like permitting, whether it be drilling offshore. And I guess this is somewhat related, but I look at when the agencies get involved with decisions such as forcing drilling so far out into the ocean that it becomes, with the water pressure, much more difficult to do, they're actually better off doing it in more shallow water to prevent these types of accidents. So it's almost like the government makes decisions that ultimately make the matters worse or potentially worse.
Yeah, that's right. Potentially worse is a great example. And not building Keystone XL is another example of that. We have the most efficient refineries, in the world, and to not allow, all of this oil to come down to our Gulf Coast refineries, which are the best and probably some of the most regulated in the world, and to then ship that oil over to China, where the oil is going to be refined in much less regulated refineries. There's going to be unintended environmental consequences as a result of making these decisions. And Keystone, President Obama said that greenhouse gas emissions would be a main determiner of whether this pipeline gets approved or not. And the State Department, again, for I believe it was the 5th time, has said that this oil is coming out of the ground one way or another, so the climate impact of building this pipeline is going to be negligible. Yet we're still without the final approval to build it.
Yeah, and I would add that we've witnessed a lot of train accidents, not just in the United States, but the one up in Canada that blew up a fair, I forget the name of the town, but that explosion where the train rolled into the town. I mean, these are significant things from something that to me is probably more dangerous than a pipeline. And certainly something, because when you're talking about moving parts like that, and you never know, something could be across the railways as the cars are moving, regardless of how safe the containers are that hold the oil or other materials. And to me, pipelines are safe, efficient, affordable way of doing this. Yeah, and I would add that we've witnessed a lot of train accidents, not just in the United States, but the one up in Canada that blew up a fair, I forget the name of the town, but that explosion where the train rolled into the town. I mean, these are significant things from
Yeah, that's right. And the statistics show that when it comes to fatalities and when it comes to the environment, pipelines are by far and away the safest method of transporting petroleum products.
So, is Barack Obama, is he too busy on some of the other issues, or is he going to be taking the lead on this one? I think his White House staff.
I think he's going to be taking a lead on this, and ultimately Congress is going to have to step up to stop it. Of course, that would require the president's approval to stop these regulations. But I think just showing that there's not a will to handle these environmental regulations that again are going to drive up the cost. They're going to particularly harm the manufacturing industry, and the president has said that he wanted to make climate change one of his signature issues. So I think he's going to move full steam ahead on this issue, through the Environmental Protection Agency, probably other agencies as well, to again limit the production of our affordable, reliable energy sources.
I guess that makes the GOP winning the Senate even more important until Barack Obama finishes his second term in office.
Yeah, that's right. And if you just again, I mean, it's certainly the coal states that are hit hard, but just because there's so many energy intensive industries, around the country, particularly in the Mideast, you look at places like Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin, they're going to be hit particularly hard by these regulations too. So, it's definitely not just the coal states, although they'll definitely be hit hard. This economic pain is going to spread throughout the country.
Interesting. Here's another thing, if I could, two things if I could bring up real quick before we finish up to you. One is that I've been paying attention to the permitting of the nuclear power plants, which we finally have approved a couple, but I'm also paying attention to the large amount of plants that we have throughout our country, and we have many more that are coming offline or are actually just being shut altogether. For one reason or another, and so I don't think we're actually replacing nuclear power. I think we're actually going to have less at some point. But to me, that's dangerous for two things. One is I think nuclear is a fantastic source of energy for many reasons, but also in not pursuing the advanced building of modern plants, I think technologically we're falling behind some of the countries who are doing that. And I understand American countries contribute to the building in these other nations, but at some point we're going to lose.
Right, and we have all of these new innovative technologies that people want to build, but they can't get through the regulatory process. And we really need to fix the regulatory process to build these new large light water reactors, which we have 104 of, across the country. And even the regulatory pathway to license and build those is just too complex and really just takes too long. Talk about these newer technologies, the small modular reactors. There's a ton of potential here because they have they provide less energy, but they have much smaller upfront capital costs. So when economic times are constrained and people can't get maybe the financing they need to build these $7 to $10 billion reactors, they might be able to get financing for these smaller reactors, but the Nuclear Regulatory Commission just isn't really equipped to regulate and handle these smaller reactors. So it's regulatory obstacles that's really thwarting the growth and potential of our nuclear capabilities here.
And that's a shame because like I said, I think, and I guess this is a pretty general statement, that I really don't have anything against any particular source of energy. I just believe in free markets and allowing an economy to determine what makes sense for it. And meaning that if solar and wind are really the options, then them just competing in the energy arena will eventually just gain market share. But if they always have to be subsidized, or if we have to kill other industries to allow them to flourish only because there's no one left, to me, I think we're doing a disservice to not just the American people, but the consumer.
You're right, and that's costing us as ratepayers and as taxpayers to help fund these projects. And in a free market, we want to see whatever is most economically viable and innovative compete for the demand for electricity and transportation fuels. And there's a huge demand for both of those things. People need to turn their lights on, and people need to get to work and drive their cars. So whatever fuel or whatever energy source is most competitive should be the one that supplies that energy, and that's what we want to see, without having to worry about using taxpayer money to help foot the bill to fund some of these projects or regulate some of them out of existence. And we want to see a competitive, robust energy industry, and that's best done in the free market.
Absolutely. Well, Nick Loris, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Could you please share with our listeners the website for the Heritage Foundation?
Sure. Please check out heritage.org.
Okay, excellent. Well, we look forward to having you again soon. Take care.
Great. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.